my baby.
Hello, I'm Melissa Bondi.
And I'm Dana Denha, and this is Adventures in Parenthood. Throughout this series, we'll explore the world of raising kids from newborn through adulthood.
Your child's safety is always a thought in your mind, and in the right car seat and installation can give you a peace of mind that you need when traveling with your little ones. Kids are in car seats longer, and choosing the right one can be a very daunting task. Dana and I both know this firsthand. So tell us about when you brought your little one home. What your experience was like in the car seat.
Well, I think first it was getting the base installed prior to, like, you have to get it installed before you go to the hospital, because no one at the hospital is going to walk out the door and go to your car with you and do it. Like, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Like, I think that's some fantasy that you think is going to happen. So yeah, we got the base installed, and we had a friend do it, and he did it super tight, and it was nice and everything. But then when we were actually like putting her in the car seat in the room in the hospital, we didn't even know how to loosen the straps. And we had the nurse that was in the room at the time did not know how to do it either. So then she had to go get help from somebody. It was like a whole ordeal.
Especially for a new mom.
Yeah, we had no idea.
Literally.
Because I feel like I've put a kid in a car seat before, but I don't think I'd ever put a newborn in a car seat before.
Yeah, right. The whole new other ballpark, especially when you only held them for 24 hours of that.
Yeah. So what about you? Did you have any like weird anxieties when you?
No, but I can tell you real briefly that I had the wrong outfit for her in her take-home outfit. When every parent has a take-home outfit, I was like, what are you going to bring her home in? And I had some type of onesie because it was in winter. And the nurse there was like, you can't take her home in that. And I'm like, just wide-eyed, kind of teary, going, oh my gosh, I can't take her home in this. What am I going to put her? I do remember that, and I remember vividly thinking,
was it?
I don't have an
outfit?
outfit.
The car seat, like, because you couldn't put her in a car seat in that outfit, or?
Yeah, it was it
was too thick.
It was a fleece onesie, and she said, no, you can't do it because of the straps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had no idea. I was all excited for it. So I don't, that's in the past, and I don't really look back at it. But
that's funny, because when I remember the outfit I put Keaton in to leave the hospital, and she looked like a sloppy mess because it didn't fit her at all. So I didn't really care.
No.
Well, joining us is Maurice Snodgrass, Injury Prevention Program Lead, and Betsy Mott, Injury Prevention Specialist. And they're here to fill us in on car seat safety, which obviously is a big issue.
Right.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about your training and how you become a specialist in strapping kids into car seats?
So we go through about 32 to 40 hours of actual training to become certified to become child passenger safety technicians, which is our official title. And it takes a lot, because there's a lot of seats out there, there's a lot of vehicles out there, and there's a lot of compatibility issues between car seats and vehicles. So we kind of have to learn a really broad, we have to have a really broad look at what we're going to be faced with, so that we can handle any situation that comes in. So we can try to be able to go from one vehicle to another vehicle, and one situation to another, and hopefully be able to make it work depending on whatever car seat might show up and whatever vehicle might show up when a family needs help. So,
is this something? So, is there something you would recommend? What's a standard, something you would tell a new parents?
What, like, brand?
I've got the car seat. This is what everybody must do. Is there like a base?
So our line is usually that we want a car seat that you're going to be able to use right every time. And so we wanted to make sure it fits the child. We want to make sure it fits in your vehicle. And we want to make sure you're going to be able to do it right every time. So we don't have a specific brand that we recommend. We don't have a specific style necessarily. I mean, there's some different stages Betsy will talk about with the different ages and the sizes of babies, what's the best seat for them at that stage. But when it comes to a specific seat, there's not like any specific, like, this is the one that you have to get, because really they all go through so much crash testing, and the standards that they have to adhere to are so high that if any seat is being sold on the market, they should all be able to protect the same way. So we just want to make sure that families can use the seat right, that it's affordable. You don't have to go out and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a car
That was my other
seat.
question, like,
Yeah.
because when you go look at car seat, I got the car seat stroller combo for the
Sure.
infant one, but I'm like, I'm not going to spend a ridiculous amount of money on a stroller car seat combo. But I feel like a lot of people, like when you look at their baby registries, their car seats are really expensive, and I felt like I didn't want to get the cheapest car seat out there, but I also didn't feel like I needed to spend like a crazy amount of money on a car seat.
Go ahead.
Like Marie said, just because a car seat is more expensive does not mean that it's any safer. So they'll advertise different kinds of crash testing, but in terms of the federal standard, that's all the same. So the things that people are actually checking, making sure those car seat manufacturers adhere to, the minimum standard is the same for a $99 car seat as it is for a $500. So anything beyond that can be ease of use or comfort, and those aren't nothing, but they're not everything either. So if money is a concern, just more expensive does not mean safer.
So is it kind of like when purchasing a car, it's like, do you want those bells and whistles
Exactly.
versus, but like
Yep.
you said, there are
Everything's going to get you from point A to point B,
Okay.
and then maybe you'll have a warm butt while you're doing it.
Okay. Another thing that we were talking about is the things in a vehicle for kids that are, we call them obstacles. Something that is distractions for parents and using in the car, like hooking things up to maybe something on the car seat, like putting
Oh, like
toys.
the infant one when you have the bar.
Is
I've
that-
always heard you're not supposed to put toys on them, but everybody does it.
Yeah, so we don't recommend adding anything to a car seat that didn't come with it when you purchased it, because
Okay.
that seat, when you walk out of a store or take it out of the box, has been crash tested just like that.
Okay.
So the same as adding extra padding or extra inserts, things like that, different types of things, we don't recommend that. We don't recommend adding toys. Anything that could potentially break off or come off or slip or slide or do something in a crash that could be a danger to the baby or to somebody else in the vehicle, we don't recommend.
Does that include, I'm sorry.
Mirrors that go on the back of seats. So when you talk about distractions, that's probably the biggest thing that we worry about is
Right.
those aren't attached with anything really all that strong. So the forces of a crash are pretty much guaranteed to pull that mirror off. And it's usually right behind a baby's face. So it's probably going to come at a baby. The other thing that we worry about is the fact that it takes your eyes, you have to look into your mirror to find that baby. And if it gets jarred, you're doing a lot of this. And so your eyes are off the road for really probably longer than you want them to be. And so our recommendation is always, if you have a concerned baby's upset, find a safe way to pull over and get out and check on the baby. Because that's ultimately what you would have to do if the baby, and you saw the baby was upset, you would do that anyway. So we just kind of recommend that we try to eliminate roller shades on the windows and mirrors.
Those too, because those are on the sides. So you don't
Anything that could
necessarily
break
think.
free and could potentially fly around in a vehicle in a
Could be
crash.
as a-
Yeah, those are all things. that we
What
kind of-
about, you see it all the time, what about the blankets that they put over the strollers, the car seat? They put the blankets, sometimes you'll put one over a baby, and then sometimes they have ones that hook on. In the winter, you recommend obviously taking them off once you get them in the car? Taking it off the
If it's over their face, yes.
Okay.
So the kind that are completely cover
Yeah.
the car seat, then yes, we would recommend folding that back once you're in the vehicle, and that helps prevent rebreathing, so they're getting more carbon dioxide than they are oxygen. If it's just a blanket tucked over them in the harness, as long as the harness is snug and you only add the blanket after they're already buckled in nice and tight, then that's fine. As long as it's tucked in tightly around them so it can't become dislodged and get in front of their face.
Okay.
Well, Melissa mentioned that she had too thick of an outfit on for her baby. I've also heard that you're not supposed to put them in coats and car seats and stuff like that. But is there like a cutoff at some point? Like, could you put a baby in a coat in that car seat or in a booster seat?
So any harnessed car seat, you don't want to put them in a coat.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that we want the harness to be really snug against the baby's body, not against whatever they're wearing. So the thicker an item is, the harder it is to tell how tight that harness is. And in a crash, anything fluffy is going to smush down, meaning that they're not actually buckled tightly. So as long as you can get a good fit with a seatbelt and a booster seat, it's less of a concern there, because that seatbelt will lock in a crash the same way it would for you or I.
It's the
So
real seatbelt from the car.
Exactly. So it's not going to lock until you're in a crash when you get that kind of jarring motion. Whereas with a 5-point harness, that's only as tight as we make it. And so if it's tight on a fluffy coat, that coat smushes down after a force of impact, then the child's going to accelerate into the harness, making them less safe.
Okay.
What about like a hand-me-down car seat? Because I've had people, like, I know when I was having a baby, they were like, oh, I have an old car seat if you want it. And I'm like, your kids are like 7 years old. So I'm like, that car seat, is it up to today's standards? Would I feel comfortable putting a newborn in a car seat that's 7 years old? Is there a cutoff for that? Like, should
Yes,
you? Yeah.
there is a cutoff. So
Yeah.
the things to look for when we're talking about secondhand seats are, we want to make sure it's not recalled. So checking on the manufacturer's website, or with NHTSA. If a parent has registered their car seat, then you should be notified if they discover anything wrong with the seat down the road. Car seats do expire. Generally, it's 6 years from when they were made. Every car seat's going to have a sticker on the underside that will have that date of manufacture. Some of them have an additional expiration date. If they don't, then you can generally assume it's 6 years from when it was made.
Okay.
And you also want to make sure car seats are only tested for one crash. So if they've ever been involved in a collision, then you want to replace that seat. And
Okay.
the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration has details on that on their website, which is
Well,
safercar.gov.
Yeah, because I actually recall my sister got into just like a slight fender bender. It wasn't any like sort of real impact where anyone would moved like that. Would, in that case, she need to replace her car seat?
It depends on the manufacturers. All have their own
Yeah.
set of rules, and some of them just err on the side of anytime there's anything with a crash, get rid of the seat. Some of them will go through NHTSA's checklist, like Betsy was saying, and look at things like whether the airbags were deployed, whether the car was drivable from the scene, whether anybody was injured in the car, or whether the impact was on the side where the seat is. So things like that we'll look at. So it kind of depends on the manufacturer. So if we ever have questions, I'll recommend that the family just contact the manufacturer and ask them directly just to see where they stand on it. And most insurance companies, if you have full coverage on your car, will actually help with replacement
Oh,
of
really?
seats and vehicles if you've been in a crash and there was a car seat in your vehicle.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to ask about, Dana and I talked about this early on, was where do you place the car seat in the back seat? I was on the side because I had no idea that you are supposed to put it in the middle. And that's when I did some reading and Dana had told me that that's what they did, put it in the middle. I had no idea, and no one told me at the hospital, no one told me beforehand.
Well, no one's telling anyone anything. at the
Yeah,
hospital.
well, right. No, right. You're out the door at when it's release time. But I had no idea that my husband, neither one of us had even. It was complete shock when she told me she did that. I said, "What? You put it on the
Does
middle?"
it depend on the car, or?
I was.
Well, I mean, there's a few things that we look at. If all things are perfect and the stars are aligned and we can make everything compatible and work well together, then we would recommend, and if there's one child, we'd recommend put them in the middle because then you've got a kind of equal amount of cushion all the way around them. So if you have a side impact, then they're not near either door. We don't know of any data that says that one side gets crashed more than the other. So when it comes to going to a side, it's not like you can say, well, if you have to go, don't go to the driver's side or don't go to the passenger side. There's nothing that differentiates when it comes to that. So we say if you can go to the middle, go to the middle, and then you've got a nice amount of protection all the way around the baby in case there's a side impact crash. That being said, there are sometimes issues with compatibility. Sometimes you've got humps in the middle seat. Sometimes you've got other issues that might prevent it from being, a split seat situation where seats fold down, where you could have issues getting that seat in nice and snug. So we try for that, but it doesn't always work. And then you've got issues with parents that are carpooling and parents that have other children and parents that maybe aren't as tall and can't reach into the middle as easily in a big vehicle. So when it comes to that, we really want you to do it wherever, again, you can get it in the best and get it in the safest and the tightest, and you know that it's a nice, secure fit.
When you talk about tightness, is there any sort of wiggle at all? When
Less than an inch of movement at the side where it's buckled in
okay,
is the standard. So that's especially important for rear-facing car seats because a lot of times they'll wiggle up by where baby's head's going to be, the part that's actually towards the front of the vehicle, and that can seem kind of disconcerting. But we're always looking at the side where it's actually buckled, and that's where you always want to check for tightness.
okay.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break, and we come back when we're going to do some demonstrations. So yes, don't go anywhere. We will be right back to talk more about car seat safety. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Adventures in Parenthood. We are talking with Marie and Betsy about car seat safety. Welcome back, ladies. So now I think we're going to begin with stages and then showing us proper techniques and ages and the different types of seats that you have. So what do we have first? Newborns, I'm gonna assume.
So we recommend kids stay rear facing until they're at least 2 years old. That is an AAP recommendation. It's relatively new, but rear facing car seats help protect a child's neck and spine better. So while their heads are so big relative to the rest of their body, it allows them a little bit of time for their body to catch up. There's two main types of rear-facing car seats. You can have a rear-facing only seat, the kind that most people think of when they think of a newborn car seat with the base that stays in the car and then the removable carry handle that you can attach to a stroller. There's also convertible car seats, which is what we have right here. This switches from rear-facing to forward-facing. So you don't have the convenience of being able to take it out of the vehicle, but you are able to use it for a really long time.
So you could use that the day you take the baby home.
This starts at 5 pounds.
Okay.
So yep, as long a term baby, yes, would be just fine in this seat, and it would just be solely a convenience factor to have the carry handle seat.
Is there a time frame? Because I had my baby in the carry handle seat until she was over a year old. Is there a time where she should just not be? I mean, she'd never reached the weight requirement for it.
So most babies grow out of that type of seat by height before weight.
Yeah.
Weight, a lot of them go up to 30, 35,
Yeah,
which can be a 4-year-old. But most of them are about 30 or 32 inches. So generally speaking, they grow out of them by height before weight.
Okay.
But in terms of age, as long as they fit into the restrictions of that seat, then no, it shouldn't have to move to the next stage.
Right. Yeah, I remember lugging.
Yeah,
I was still lugging it
it
at just over 1, and I'm going, oh my gosh, this is definitely over 30 pounds with the baby and the car seat. But it was soon after she went into that one. But
there's a point where it's less practical to do
Yes.
that, but as long as they fit into the restrictions of that seat. And part of the crash standard is actually having stickers on the side of the seat that indicate those height and weight limits. So if you're not sure what the restrictions on your seat are, that's a great first place to look.
Okay. So you have this baby in there.
Yes.
And
So this is the convertible car seat. So it switches from rear facing to forward facing. This type of seat so as long as they're rear facing, where the harness comes out of the shell of the car seat, you want to be level to or slightly below the child's shoulders.
Oh, below, okay.
For rear facing.
Yeah.
This particular seat has a no rethread harness, so you just have to slide it up. That varies a little bit from manufacturer to manufacturer, but that's what we'd be looking for as long as they're rear facing. Any harnessed car seat, we want to be really snug on the child so that you can't pinch any webbing. And you want to make sure it's snug around their legs as well. A lot of times with newborns, newborns especially, we see them frogging up their legs. If they have extra slack around their hip, then they can get their whole knee out of that. So usually, if you make sure that it's snug around their legs too, then that's a good way to.
So you're pinching it, like, because what I was always told to like put your finger underneath for like to see how much in the shoulders.
Yeah, we've kind of moved away from that in the last several years. It's not an exact science for that. Fingers are different size. That varies a little bit depending on what the child's wearing. So the pinch test really gives us a better idea of if it's actually tight enough.
And then the harness is where the placement. Why don't you show us exactly where it should be on the baby?
The plastic chest clip we always want to be level to the child's armpits.
Okay.
So if you think about it resting on their sternum, we want it on that hardest part of their chest. That's going to do the best job to keep that harness in place and prevent them from coming out the top of the seat.
My husband, I noticed he always does it very, very tight. And a few times I've been like, oh, that's really tight. Like, look, and I said, I think it's too tight. And he said, there's no such thing. He was just absolutely not. He's like, I'll take care of it. And to me, I'm like, oh, she looks uncomfortable. But he said, it's not. And to me, too tight is when you see super like strap lines on her when you take it off. Like, to me, that's kind of just common sense. Like, it's probably too tight. But is there a thing as not too tight? No such thing as not too tight?
I usually tell moms, like, think about like your bra strap or a tank top or something like that. Like, you don't want it leaving marks on you, but you also don't want it sliding off your shoulders. So you have to find that kind of happy medium where you know it's going to just stay put.
Okay.
If I am trying to reassure a parent that it's not too tight, I do the pinch test, and I'll say, but see, I can still slide my finger underneath there. So there's still a little bit of space here. It's tight enough where I can't grab anything, but at the same time, it's not hurting her. It's not gonna be too tight for her that she can't breathe or can't move. So yeah, I think there probably could be a too tight, but generally when we think that, often we're not tight enough still. Like, we're just worried about them.
So if you see strap lines in their skin,
if you're making
too
marks
tight.
on them, and maybe
That's
we
too
need
tight.
to, yeah.
That's the point right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this car seat specifically, it reclines back. Is that how? Yes. So so I'm currently in that sort of car seat, and she's reclined all the way back. She's rear facing. What do you ever recline it back up again? Like, when does that happen?
Forward facing.
When you forward face?
And then depending on the car seat, sometimes they'll have multiple reclines that can be used rear facing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have multiple reclines that can be used forward facing. It just depends on the manufacturer.
I think the one I have has like 4 reclines, but I feel like at first we installed it and we had it up a couple, and she was so upright, it was outrageous. Like, it was like she was just sitting. She was like sitting like this almost. So then we just put it all the way back, and it actually looked normal. But when you don't have a baby in it, you can't tell. You can't tell until they sit in it and it's in the car, the normalcy of it and like how they would feel comfortable, I guess.
It's usually a range.
Yeah.
So the general rule of thumb is that any rear-facing car seat should be between 30 and 45 degrees reclined. There has to be some indication on the car seat itself of what is an appropriate recline. Sometimes that means a line that should be level to the ground. Sometimes it's a built-in level that moves like an actual like bubble level that moves back and forth. A lot of times the recline angles that are built in are also there to help accommodate for different slopes of seats of cars. Sometimes cars have really deep seats, and so then they need to have a bigger recline to adjust for that.
Okay.
Can we talk about now, so we've grown out of this car seat, or that could possibly even turn into a booster for all I know. I have no idea. But now this is the booster over here. This big kid over here is in the booster. And what do we need to do with a booster seat?
What age typically?
So as we're going through the stages, and we start with rear facing and we kind of grow through it, we really focus more on size than we do on age, because every 2-year-old, every 4-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, they're all going to be different. And so we want to make sure that we're doing what's right by each child. So this seat, we talked about, this seat actually has a rear facing harness limit to 40 pounds.
Okay.
So you were talking about your daughter's almost 2, and you're thinking you're getting close to that stage of turning her around, but if she's a very small 2-year-old and she's only, let's say, 29 pounds, I wouldn't be in a hurry to turn her around. So we always want to make sure that parents understand that each stage, if you can keep them at each stage as long as possible, that's the safest stage. And when we move to the next stage, we lose a little bit of safety each time. So we want to try to prolong each stage as long as possible. So we go from from rear facing to forward facing. This seat in particular has a harness that goes up to 65 pounds. So when we've outgrown that harness of 65 pounds and we're looking at a child that needs to be in a seatbelt now because they've outgrown their harness, then we get to a stage where generally they're not quite ready to fit in a seatbelt like us. The law is a little confusing for parents when it comes to booster seats. It says that a child under 8 years old has to be in a booster seat, or they can be if they're 4'9", they can be out of a booster seat. What we find is your average 4'9" child is between 11 and 12. So we see a lot of kids at 8 years old popping out of booster seats, but not quite being big enough and strong enough and the right size to fit in a seatbelt like you and I do. So that seatbelt could actually potentially do more damage in a crash than it is actually helping protect them. So the booster seat, what it does is it just boosts them up, and it holds the seatbelt in place. So it holds the seatbelt low along their hips, and it keeps the shoulder belt going across the middle of their chest. Because what we see with kids when belts don't fit them is they're putting them behind them, they're putting them under their arm, they're doing things like that, which are really dangerous in a crash. We need them to have this upper body protection. And this actually has a little guide in it. In this style booster, this is a high back booster, and it has a little guide that kind of holds that seatbelt in place. But with this comes a lot of freedom. So this child can move just like you and I can in a car. So we really don't recommend, if they haven't outgrown that harness yet, we don't recommend jumping to this too soon, because parents will come to us and say, she's all over the place. She's getting out of her seat. She can move. She's not sitting still, and she's not, because this takes a lot of maturity. This takes a child that's ready to be in a seatbelt.
And this booster seat is actually not strapped to the car like these ones are.
Correct.
You're just using the seat belt
It
after
just
they
rests
sit in
on the
it.
seat.
Yeah.
It's meant to rest on the seat. It's meant basically just to position that seat belt so that it stays in the proper place on them for the ride that they're going on. So no, this isn't made to. This is going to slide around. That's not made to be installed. It's just made to hold that seat belt in place.
And then you said they're in that until they're about like 12 years old, or depending on their size.
4'9" is what we're really looking for. There's like a 5-step test, so we want to make sure that they can kind of meet before we move them straight to the seat belt. And it looks at how they're fitting in the seat, how their legs are bending over the seat, how their feet are touching, a lot of things, and making sure that the seatbelt stays on them properly for the whole ride. So yeah, we're recommending really looking more at their size and their age. And there's some smaller kids out there that really should, that are older, that are just on the small side, that aren't fitting in seatbelts and should still have some kind of a
Are
position.
all of these, everything we talked about today, like, yes, there's a lot of info, and I'm already like, oh my gosh, what age? What weight? What age? All of this online, like all of these. I know this stuff gets updated, like, I don't know, yearly. Like, it used to be 1, you could turn them around.
Right,
now
right.
it's 2. So is all of this online, readily available for parents to seek?
Yeah, there's actually a really good website that we recommend parents look at, and it's safercar.gov. And they actually have a place where you can put in your child's information, your child's age, your child's size, and it will give you back what the recommendations are. And there's ranges, so there's kind of some overlapping that can happen. And so it kind of gives you all the options that you have, but it will make the best recommendation for you, like the safest recommendation, then it'll tell you what all your options are. So it's a nice way of kind of narrowing it down at least, and looking at a little bit of a smaller snapshot of what you should be doing. There's still a lot of options for parents, so it really does. Betsy talked about the stickers on the seats. It really kind of depends on what your seat is that you have.
Well, I'd like to mention, correct myself from earlier, that CSMOT does help you install car seats. The hospital I went to did not, but so if you are going to CSMOT, and you said more hospitals are working to get to that point where they can help you install the car seat. But let's say we have any of us, we have a new mom helping us on the crew, or even Melissa and I as we're transitioning, how can we get involved, like get to you guys to know that we're doing this right?
Sure. We do have inpatient appointments available, so if you are delivering at Mott, it's the same phone number as our community program. We have 6 fitting stations every month through Washtenaw and Livingston County. To make an appointment at one of those fitting stations, you just give us a call at 734-763-2251, and we get you set up at one of our upcoming stations at a time and hopefully location that works for you.
Good. All right. Well, thank you both for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have an idea for a parenting show topic or guest, talk to us on Twitter and Facebook at #CTN Ann Arbor.
And for more great programming and services of CTN, you can visit us on the web at a2gov.org/watchctn. And thanks for joining us on this episode of Adventures in Parenthood.